Hi there, everybody. Welcome back to The Extra Mile. My name is Gene Gurkoff, and I am so pumped for this episode. It's an interview that I recorded last week when I was in Boulder, Colorado. I had the opportunity to meet ultra-running legend Scott Jurek. For those of you who don't know, Scott is one of the most accomplished ultramarathoners of all time. Amongst other things, he's won the Western States 100-mile race, one of the most famous ultramarathons. He's won that not once, not twice, but 7 times. He's won Badwater, 135 miles through Death Valley in the summer. He's won that twice and set a course record there. He also set a course record for thru-hiking the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine. But he is not just one of the most accomplished ultramarathoners. He's an incredibly kind and generous person, and his running has taken him all over the world to help some amazing people and amazing organizations, including some of our own partners like Every Mother Counts, Achilles International, and the USO. And we'll get to hear all about that in the interview. It's a great interview. You're really going to love it. Really quick, though, first, of course, I do want to thank our partners at Thrive Market. They're a great company. For those of you who don't know about Thrive, they're like an online grocery store, mixed between Whole Foods and Costco, where for a low monthly membership, you get to save a ton of money on all of your healthy, natural, organic groceries. It's a $60 annual membership, and in my first time shopping on Thrive, I saved more than that, so the membership pays for itself. Also, for every membership that they sell, they give a free membership to a family in need because they are on a mission to make sure that everybody has access to affordable, healthy food. Lastly, about Thrive, they are giving an additional 25% off your first order to all of our Charity Miles members. So if you're interested in that, go to thrivemarket.com/charitymiles and check them out. We are so grateful for the opportunity to work with them. And of course, we are so grateful to all of you for joining us. Thank you again for all of your encouraging reviews and feedback and for sharing this with your friends. This podcast has been so much fun for me, this episode especially. So without any further ado, let's turn up your volume and turn on your Charity Miles and come along for the walk with me and Scott Jurek in Boulder, Colorado. Thanks, everybody. Every mile matters. Hi there, everybody. Welcome back to The Extra Mile. My name is Gene Gurkoff. I am here in Boulder, Colorado today. Beautiful day in Boulder, Colorado, and I am walking with an ultra running legend today, Scott Jurek. For those of you who don't know, Scott Jurek is one of the most accomplished ultra marathoners, ultra runners of all time. He's won the Western States 7 times, I believe. He's won Did you win Leadville?
No, second in Leadville.
Second in Leadville. He set course records on Badwater. Set a course record on the Appalachian Trail. I think he has the U.S. record for the most miles run in 24 hours, like 165 miles. Is that right?
That's correct, and that's the second fastest now. Somebody has beaten it since.
Somebody's beaten it. But even more than being an accomplished ultra runner, Scott is just a great person. He's extremely involved philanthropically with a number of causes that are in Charity Miles, with Every Mother Counts, with the Nature Conservancy, with Achilles International, many more, which we'll talk about. And Scott, I'm just super grateful for you being generous with your time today and taking the time to walk with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be on the show, and you're doing some great stuff. And like I said, this is what it's all about. I mean, we love to run, but it's what we do beyond the running, I think, that matters most.
Awesome. Thank you. So if you can paint a picture for our listeners who are hopefully walking or running along with us, where are we right now?
Well, we're actually just below the foothills and the Flatirons of Boulder, Colorado. Those of you who've maybe seen pictures, the Flatirons are these huge granite pieces of stone that just rise kind of cantilevered at probably a 50-degree angle. And we're only probably a mile as the crows fly around here from those, and we're walking along some of the bike paths of Boulder. So again, a little bit of the urban / wild mountain life here.
Love it. And actually, I'm sorry, we're actually walking with one other special guest today, Scott's daughter, Raven, who is, how old?
She's 14 months.
14 months. She's in one of those carrier backpacks on Scott's back.
So I'm getting a little resistance, an extra 22 pounds per size. Yeah.
And so she's 14 months.
Yep.
Maybe this is like an interesting place to start, because other podcasts I listen to usually start with a lot of your your running accomplishments, but how's life as a father? I'm a new father too. As I mentioned,
congrats.
I got
that's right.
an 11-month-old son, Max, and I love getting out walking and running and hiking with him. So
got tons of honeybees right here on the the flowers that we're walking by. It's been obviously a shift, but a welcome shift. It's something that Jenny and I, our little Raven here, has been a long-term project. She didn't come along quickly or easily, but we're super psyched. It's obviously changed some things in our life, and then other things have just been a real blessing and a real just surprise. And I think that's what life is all about. It's about that, being adaptable and being ready. I mean, one of the things Jenny and I do miss that we don't get to do as much as go for trail runs together without having a sitter or not having family in town. That's one thing that we're like, oh yeah, we haven't gone for like a 3-4 hour trail run by ourselves, just her and I, whereas we get to run with friends or take off individually. But yeah, it's been great. And Raven's traveled to Bhutan with us, where I did a project over there with the Sisters Marathon Initiative, and she's made it to Boston. She's definitely getting her traveling in. So
that's great.
She's having a lot of fun, and it's fun to see things through, I think, a different perspective. And that's one thing that I've always appreciated, is seeing not only my running career, but seeing life in general through another person's eyes or feelings or thoughts, and just kind of try to understand what they're going through.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of what running is about, especially when you're running for a cause, is about that empathy and running or walking in someone else's shoes. And I think that you've certainly done a lot of that. You did a marathon for the Himalayan Cataracts Project, is that right?
That's correct.
Also with Every Mother Counts in Tanzania. You've been a guide for blind athletes in Boston Marathon, I think also here in the Boulder.
Yep, and actually at the Blind Marathon Championships, actually, at Cal International last December too, which was a really fun event. And that was the fastest I've run with a visually impaired athlete.
Really?
And sub 3 hour marathon pace is not easy when you're guiding. So
not easy when you're not guiding.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I've seen it from all sorts of angles. But yeah, it's really been a fun group of athletes to be a part of, and just it's really been inspirational too.
Who are some of the athletes that you've guided? Who are some of the visually impaired athletes that you've guided?
So I've worked with my buddy Thomas Ponick, who I've actually done some work with his organization, Guiding Eyes, and they train guide dogs for visually impaired. Not just athletes, but everyday folks that just need to get around, go to work, live their daily lives. But they're doing some cool stuff with guide dogs and getting them to train for running. And it's pretty cool, because the idea is a visually impaired runner can actually walk out the door with their guide dog and go for a run without a human guide. And that's their goal, is to not only do what they're doing, but they're also training dogs to be running dogs, so
that's
to speak.
Amazing.
Yeah, running partners. So
has that happened? Like, has there been a dog that's actually done that with?
So they have a couple that they haven't actually. A couple of their co-workers, as well as people that are involved with the organization, so they haven't, I guess, at least as far as I know, trained a dog and handed it over to somebody who's not part of the organization. So they're pretty close to that point. But Thomas has a dog who's obviously run with him. And then actually last or 2 summers ago, when I was out on the Appalachian Trail setting the record, Thomas came out and ran with me, and he had
that's amazing.
Yeah, he had his guide dog with him, and this was one that was being trained for running, and I guided him for close to 3 miles on the Appalachian Trail as I'm trying to set this record in my. And it was as much as it sounds like that's just crazy or what am I thinking, but it was such a cool experience, and it was something that I can't complain right now, because if Thomas is doing this blind, I really can't complain about doing my 50 miles a day.
Right. Well, let's talk about that for a little second, because some of the listeners out there might not know what you just referred to. You set the record for the Appalachian Trail, for thru-hiking the Appalachian Trail. And I don't know if it was thru-hike, you ran it.
Well, I mean,
you ran, hiked, walked, but
exactly. It's kind of however crawl, stumble, whatever you can do to get through the trail. So for me, it was a lot of fast power walking, hiking.
Right.
Even though I'm a runner, anybody who's set foot on the Appalachian Trail knows
it's very technical,
how burly it is, and just how rugged and root infested, rock infested it is.
And so, but one of the things that I think is so unique about the way that you did it is that, yes, while you were out there to set this record, you really, other people who try to do that really like pare down to like, minimum what they're carrying, like no baggage, or really just like dialing in like every second. And you were trying to involve other people, and stopping to take photos and guiding a blind athlete halfway through it. And you did it with Jenny, was a running crew for you. I'd love to. Is there any like stories in particular that, I'm sure there's so many, but like what are some of the stories that really stand out for you from that journey?
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, it's almost as if it happened yesterday. I know Jenny and I are writing the second book, and at times it's been really tough, but right now it's really super fresh.
Right.
And I think that's an experience like that has so many emotions tied to it, so many experiences, so many other people that were involved. And Jenny and I weren't really planning on it snowballing into this thing where 20 people would be out at a trailhead waiting to run for a little bit, maybe just get a book signed or get a photo like you said. We just didn't think it was gonna turn into that, because the Appalachian Trail is accessible, but at the same time it's still not super close for a lot of people. But I guess one story that hits me and hit me really in a deep way out on the trail, I remember it was in Pennsylvania, somewhere middle of the state, and at that time I was putting in, the night before I'd finished at 2 a.m., well, the next morning, going all day, finished a 59-mile run, and it was the longest day I had on the trail. And the next morning, I remember I was running up this climb, and a gentleman pops up behind me, and he tells me, Scott, I'm going to go 30 miles with you today, because it's my gift to myself. He's like, I just survived cancer this spring, and I told myself, if I get through this, I'm going to run 30 miles with Scott. Wow. And I mean, you can't say no to that, but also for me, it's just like, it just put, again, everything in perspective. Like I mentioned earlier, it is about perspective. It's about trying to understand what other people are going through. And then it kind of put even though I was midway through this, amazing challenge, but also probably one of the toughest things I've done in my life, put it in perspective to be like, okay, I'm gonna let this guy join me for 30 miles because he's gonna inspire me as well. Like I'm inspiring him maybe, but he's gonna inspire me because now my day is different because of that interaction. And just him saying that. That's
amazing. So so it took you 44 days to do the trail?
46 days.
46 days. And some hours and minutes to set the record. But you were, did you have to slow down when somebody like that would run with you or want to run with you? Or were you doing your thing and he was doing his thing?
Exactly. I mean, unfortunately, I try to tell people, like, if something happens to them, the train keeps going, because I can't, I wouldn't want anything bad to happen to them, but they're kind of out there at their own risk. And they're going to need to get themselves out, because I have to keep going. And Jenny, as much as we would have loved to help people are like, hey, can you shuttle our car? And and Jenny's like, no, there's this, we're trying to stay together and hold this ship together. And so it was one of those things where people were more than welcome. And the beauty of it too for a lot of people is I wasn't moving that fast. So they could fast hike and run and keep up with me. It wasn't like I was blazing down the trail and they had to be some really fast, well-trained runner to keep up. And so I had, kids and full families join me, sometimes for a mile or 2 miles, or like my buddy Thomas, or like this gentleman, or some other thru-hikers, which was cool too, because they're a community that's out there already. And I was part of that thru-hiking community, even though I was, setting a record. They would join me sometimes for, a few miles, sometimes 18 miles. I had this one guy, his trail name was Karaoke. And so you can imagine what he did all the time. He was like singing away, and he wasn't an opera singer, let's put it that way. But he was like, I'm going to go as far as I can. He's like, I don't care how long it takes. I'm just going to keep going. And he's like, I'm going to need all the ibuprofen I can find tonight to get through all the pain. But he made it 18 miles with me, just running with his, he was ready for a resupply, meaning repacking his pack and getting more food. But he still, had his gear, his tent, his sleeping bag, and he was running and hiking along, and awesome. It was pretty neat. So there was this infectious energy, and I think relating it to what Charity Miles does, it's really about, I guess, putting a spin on your running, your walking, your exercise goals, or your nonprofit philanthropic work to, I guess, get re-energized or stay energized, and that can be a thing. So I think that's what the Appalachian Trail was, even though I didn't have this goal of creating, I guess, an energy, but there was an energy about it, and I had to give a lot of energy out, but I also received energy, and I think that's what it is. It's like energy in, energy out, passing it along, and that's why I try to tell people. A lot of people come up to me and say, Scott, you're inspiring me, and I tell them, hey, pass it on to somebody else. Like, you're inspiring people too. You don't have to be winning ultramarathons or setting records. Everyone has the capability of inspiring, whether it's a family member, a friend, a coworker, and just doing that.
Yeah, I'll say, like, for me personally, it's a unique phenomenon that people like to run for a cause or have some kind of connection to a cause with their running. And so much is about giving to that cause, but sometimes what doesn't get talked about is how much that cause gives to you in terms of the inspiration, the people that you meet, and how that inspires you to maybe push through that dark place, or adds a layer of the story that wouldn't have been there before. The people that you meet just make it so much more fun and interesting. I joke sometimes that the reason I got into guiding blind athletes myself is because I wanted someone to run with, and they can't get away from me. So it adds such a unique element to the story. I guess same thing about this podcast. I get to walk with interesting people and talk and learn from them and hear their stories. So getting to be a part of these causes, going to some place like Tanzania with Every Mother Counts and being a part of that must add such an interesting dimension to something like running a marathon, which for you right now might be rather ordinary. With the Tanzania trip, how did you get hooked up with Every Mother Counts?
Well, it's kind of funny. Some of these things happen on social media.
Oh, really?
Jenny is a huge fan of Christy Turlington, my wife, Jenny, who's a apparel designer. She's always just admired what Christy has done in the fashion world, and also all the work that she's done nonprofit-wise. And so Jenny and I at the time had been going through this, just having trouble having a child, and Jenny actually just said, hey, you're going to Chicago Marathon. Well, Christy's running the marathon. She's like, you should try to find her and connect with her. I'm like, she's not going to hang out with an ultramarathoner. She's a supermodel, and I know she's super gracious, but I'm like, that's not going to happen. Jenny's like, she follows you on Twitter. You should just direct message her. And so Christy happened to follow me on Twitter, and I sent her a direct message saying, hey, when you're at the expo, I'm going to be at the Brooks booth. If you get a chance to swing by, I'd love to meet you. And what do you know? She direct messages me back on Twitter. That's and awesome. We make that connection happen at the Chicago Marathon. And so
cool.
From there, I was like, hey, we should do some work together. I'd love to get involved. And little did I know, Jenny and I, having some personal experiences a year or two later, Jenny experiencing a very emergency miscarriage, an ectopic pregnancy. So it really was a cause, even though before that we didn't know it was going to be something that we were closely involved with or had this connection. Her work with maternal health was something that we loved that she was doing, because I think it's really important that mothers are celebrated in a lot of cultures. Unfortunately, they're just kind of seen as okay, they need to have babies, take care of the babies and the kids. But it was something that was special. And since my mother was so special to me, I just felt like I wanted to connect with her. And then from there, it just kind of took off, and we started doing some projects together, and Tanzania was one of them. And we've since then have done a lot of stuff together and been able to do some great things. So it's been a awesome organization to be a part of.
So when you went to Tanzania, it was a marathon in Tanzania for Every Mother Counts?
That's great. It was a Mount Kilimanjaro marathon. And we had folks that were also running the half marathon. I think that's the beauty, too, is a lot of events that Every Mother Counts gets involved with is is not just, say, a marathon. Although they do a lot of marathons, they're really trying to open things up so that people could do a half marathon. Because almost anybody can do a half marathon. It's funny, Christy had some of her, I wouldn't say like fans, but maybe folks in the industry had come along with the trip, and they were involved in fashion or design or something like that. And they had never done a half marathon, and for the first time, they were doing a half marathon in Tanzania. So
Mount Kilimanjaro,
exactly,
places, right?
At altitude and that sort of thing. So, and then you have the folks who had a lot of experience under their belt. They were doing marathons, had done ultras, and came over as well. So it's been a great way to bring people together too, from other facets of life and other occupations and life experiences. And I think that's, in addition to, say, the actual work that you do and how you get repaid in terms of just the feelings of helping another person, which I think my buddy Timmy is always like, it's human nature to want to help people towards a goal or towards something they want to achieve. And I think deep down all humans have that, and it's accessing it and finding a way that we feel like, okay, this is what I want to do, and really get behind it. So yeah, it's just kind of taken. But then you also have this exchange of energy from people who are just, they're interesting folks that you can learn a lot from.
Right.
And I think that's what I've, gotten a lot out of the work that I've done.
It's pretty amazing. So where you've been, you've run all over the world. What places stand out to you as maybe the most beautiful or most impactful on your experience so far?
Wow. That's a tricky one. Because, when it first comes to mind, obviously, it would be the really far away places. I mean, just because the ones that are most unique.
Yeah.
I traveled to Ethiopia for a group called the Himalayan Cataract Project, and they do eye care in the developing world. And it's quite amazing. We got to not only run with Gebre Selassie and Gebre Mariam and a bunch of these other athletes and then do a half marathon at the end, but part of the coolest experience was hanging out in the desert, working at an eye clinic all day long for 2 days, and shuttling patients from the operating room to the recovery room, and just helping out with that process. They did over close to 1,000 cataract surgeries. So they literally cured.
Over the course of how long?
Over the course of a week, cured
1,000 surgeries in a week.
So 1,000 people, either some of them were bilateral, so they had both eyes that had cataracts. Some just had one, but it was amazing to see the next day after they were recovered, help them take the patches off and watch them see for the first time. And so that to me,
talk about literally seeing something through
exactly.
someone else's eyes.
Some of these elderly patients hadn't seen in much of their lives. So for the first time now, they're seeing, and the first thing they see is I'd say not to be not politically correct, but it's like the first thing they see is a white dude, in the middle of Ethiopia, like from Minnesota. So, but they were just, some of them were fainting, some of them were just like, they just couldn't believe it that they were, and that, I mean, to me, it kind of tops the charts just because it was so, the place was magical. I love Ethiopian food, the culture. I've just been a huge fan of their culture ever since the first time I tried Ethiopian food, and just was fascinated with their runners and their long distance culture that they have there. But the place where we were for much of the trip was a very unique setting too. It was part desert, part sandstone cliffs, and just a real mesmerizing landscape. So I think it's not always that you get to be in this amazing landscape and also do amazing work. Sometimes you're in the trenches and you're in a place that isn't as cool. I mean, Tanzania, installing solar panels for some of the health clinics, and seeing some of the health clinics and how they've really been able to improve some of the just basic technology. For some of them, it's like having headlamps is one of the biggest things, having light, because a lot of them are using candles and old-fashioned kerosene lamps. So it's those kind of things are huge, but I'd say also it's sometimes I don't want to say uglier places I've been, but I did a USO tour in the middle of
USO right now.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people don't, saying like, oh, Scott, he gets to go to all these places and just focus on running, but I actually went to Kuwait and visited 5 different bases back in 2010. And not that the desert is ugly, it has a beauty of its own, but when it's 120 plus degrees. And I remember I went for a run on the track at the base one morning just to I got to experience it. And a lot of the top commanders were like, hey, don't don't do yourself in here, because we had a 9.11 K race going on that was honoring the Wounded Warriors and the Wounded Warrior Project. And all the entire base and folks from other bases around came, and it was really cool. But I went out to just experience the heat, and it reminded me so much of Badwater.
Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy just how hot. So like the desert, hot climates, like a lot of places you'd be like, oh, they're not the most pretty or the most picturesque, but there was a beauty to that trip. And talking to servicemen and women who had served 2-3 tours over in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and just getting to talk to them about what life was like, how tough it is to be away from the family, and how appreciative they were that folks take the time to come over and do something like help out with this run, do talks, and just get their mind off of the day-to-day grind that they have going on and the things that they've experienced. And so that was a really enlightening trip, even though it wasn't like I didn't get to, do something specifically like build panels, but just even talking to somebody can make all the difference in the world. And just kind of listening to them and hearing their story, not only can I receive something from that and a different perspective, but, sometimes it's just hanging out with somebody, talking to them.
That's cool. So you mentioned Badwater. Mm-hmm. Some of our listeners might not know who that is or what Badwater is, but 120 degrees.
For some people, it's a person, or seems like an ugly person when it comes. It's when you say who it is.
Who is Badwater? Could be like a vigilante's name.
I know, it sounds like an evil superhero or something like that. Yeah.
So, can you describe to our listeners what Badwater is?
Badwater is a 135-mile race that starts in Death Valley National Park at Badwater Basin. It's the lowest point in the Western Hemisphere, 246 feet below sea level. Mm-hmm. And all around you have desert, but then you have these towering mountains of 10, 11,000 feet. And it's just this amazing landscape. It's sometimes I'd liken it to like maybe something like on Mars. It just almost seems like another planet. And you run from Badwater all the way up to the portals of Mount Whitney. It used to finish at the top of Mount Whitney, but after the first couple of years, they changed that. So it just finishes at the portals, and a lot of athletes will go up the last 10, 11 miles on their own as a hike. But it's just literally, it's designed to be held during the hottest time of the year. So, right in the middle of July, temperatures, in fact, they just had it a week and a half ago, and the temperatures can reach 120 plus. And so the whole idea is to not only go from the lowest point to the highest point in the lower 48, but then you have this whole idea of like what it's like to run in one of the harshest climates on the planet.
On Mars.
Yeah, exactly. And so for a lot of people, it is just, I don't want to say staying alive, but just surviving the elements. Mm-hmm. And it's really not so much a running race as a survival race is the way I like to put it.
And you've won Badwater twice.
That's correct.
And you set a course record there?
I did, yeah.
So
it's not,
broken,
it's
right?
not, it's been broken. Right. And that's the thing. I always tell people, like, I love the fact that, it means that, people are pushing boundaries and they're always there to see how much further we can go. But yeah, it was, I think at the time, 24 hours and 36 minutes.
That's just insane.
And so at the time, people were like, oh gosh, can it go under 24 hours? And, given the right conditions, and sometimes you'll have a cooler year at Badwater where it's only 115, 110. And then you have maybe a better shot at lowering those expectations or lowering the course record. But yeah, it's an amazing event, and I've been fortunate to experience some of these crazy races, and the history and the temperatures, the environment they provide.
So that's really interesting that you say that. And there's a couple. You're from northern Minnesota, and you've since gone from there to some of the most incredible places all over the world to have these experiences, like you said. And you say that you're fortunate to have had these experiences. That gets me to the question, like, why do you do this? Like, what is driving you? What drove a kid from northern Minnesota to become this incredible ultramarathoner, incredible philanthropist, and to seek out these experiences and to push yourself to these really challenging but yet beautiful places?
I think it's I'm trying to figure that out right now, and it's writing this second book too, because like every time I do one of these great challenges, like the Appalachian Trail was probably the biggest, hardest thing I've done. 46 days of running 50 miles over some of the roughest terrain on the planet. But I'd have to say, like, first is intrigue, and I think you have to have intrigue to explore, to find out what I'm made of, to see what I can do. And for me, initially it was intrigue, and I think over the years I've learned to appreciate maybe the deeper meanings of, like, when I'm in the like trenches of a tough race or a tough challenge like the Appalachian Trail or Badwater, there's a moment in time, or there's usually several moments. It's like you have one bad moment or one like bad patch. You can have several bad patches, but there's a moment when I'm able to turn things around, and it might be physically, mentally, and spiritually, like on all levels. I have to figure out a new way through. And I think finding that way to the other side, finding the way through a problem, a challenge, adversity, to me is the magic of life, because life is pretty boring and dull, and it's not realistic to just have everything go smoothly. And I think in ultramarathoning, it's prepared me for challenges in life, and then life has prepared me for the challenges I've encountered in ultrarunning. So it's really about, I think, the age-old challenge of being a living being on this planet, of just survival. And how do you survive? How do you survive also with integrity and grace? And I think that's where the philanthropic work comes in, is that for me, life is more about just getting course records and having my own goals achieved. It's like, what can I do along the way to also help others? And so I guess after those personal battles on the race course or on the trail or road, there comes a time when I've just always felt like I've gained so much from a sport like running that I want to be able to give back through that, and find ways that I can experience running, but also experience life in a different fashion. And that's really what I think it comes down to. Like,
are you still, with all that you've accomplished, all that you've done, are you still able to experience life in a different fashion? Is it new each time? Are those dark places on the Appalachian Trail darker than the darker places in Badwater? Are you figuring it out in different ways, learning new things about yourself, even with all that you've done so far?
It's a good question, because I used to think, okay, I'm getting better at this, with each time. Like, I want to feel too, like in life, like when life throws things at me that I'm not expecting, I'm like, okay, I'm stronger now. I'm wiser now. I can get through this. But it's interesting. I feel like, in some levels, yes, I am stronger. I am wiser. I've learned more. But at the same time, it's almost like you can't prepare for it. I think that's what keeps me going back. I mean, that's what keeps me, because I like to say this, like, when you stop learning, you stop living. And like, there's never a point. I think of my great-grandparents, who I've had a couple of grandmothers who have lived almost 100 years old. Wow. And it's like, how do you keep, living? You got to keep learning. You got to keep, finding something that drives you each day. And for me, I think that's, even though I feel like, okay, I'm getting better at some things, something else gets thrown away. And that's why I keep going back. That's why, after all the racing that I've done throughout the years, to go and do something like the Appalachian Trail seems kind of like, why? Like, a lot of people say, you have nothing to prove at this point.
Right.
But I kind of feel to myself, there's something more to experience. And I guess I'd encourage that to everyone. You don't have to be at the top of a sport or a career to keep learning things, and kind of just find your own level and find the goals that you have, and then challenge yourself in ways that you didn't think were possible.
Right. Well, there's so many different kind of next questions I want to ask off of that go in different directions. One is, you talked about your grandparents and your great-grandparents, and I know you've spoken in the past about the relationship with your mother and your father and growing up in Minnesota and how that shaped you. So I would love to get a little bit on that, but you also talked about what's next. So I kind of feel like a fork in the road. Do we go to the past or do we go to to what's next?
Well, you have to learn. Yeah.
So I'll let you choose. Path in the road. Do you want to talk about how you're growing up in Minnesota, family? Maybe that experience has shaped your experience in Brighton now, or what's next? And maybe we can do both if we have the time.
Yeah, I think. Well, I can touch on both because the past, I think, prepares you for the future. At least that's the way I look at it. And definitely growing up with a mother who had multiple sclerosis, and I was, 6 years old when that first happened, and she first started having trouble walking. And I mean, that's a life experience that's gonna, slap you in the face and kick you in the stomach multiple times. And in that experience, I could look at it as like my childhood was, robbed, or I didn't get to have a mother who was like most mothers. But I've really tried never to look at life that way, like not to say something cliche that everything happens for a reason, but those experiences are a part of me, and I could either choose to, blame them and use that as an excuse, or I can just use it as a way to fuel me and to charge forward in life. So that experience, I think, is definitely paramount. And the things I did get to experience, living out on a dead-end road in northern Minnesota, like playing in the woods, hunting and fishing, having aunts and uncles and grandparents and parents that brought me out into the woods to do those things, I probably would never have been interested in running on the trails or being out in the mountains. So it's one of those things that did shape me. And then, like,
did you grow up as a Vikings fan?
I did, and I don't want to disappoint any Vikings fans out there, but I pretty much wrote them off after so many losing seasons and heartbreaks. And I know they just went through a major heartbreak last season. So.
I grew up a Vikings fan as well, even though I'm from New Jersey. And I always say that's how I learned how to endure suffering.
There you go.
That's how I started my journey into the distance community.
Well, and I think that's where Minnesotans, they know how to suffer on multiple levels, not just the cold weather, but the history of the Vikings. And then that catapults too. Like at this point in my life, I'm in my 40s. I've got a little one now myself. Like seeing things in that different perspective, and then like what's next for me, like finding. Raising Raven's been a big past year goal, and getting through that and finishing this book. But Jenny and I are like really, really ready to get out and do another adventure, and this time, bring Raven with. And
oh wow,
we haven't like finalized exactly what that's going to be, but we're hoping next year we'll be out on the trail, out on the roads, and doing something big and adventurous and exploring.
You're keeping that under wraps a little bit?
I am, just because it's like the Appalachian Trail. A lot of people were surprised because I didn't announce it till the day before I took off, and just hinted at it. And I think for me it's just easier that way at this point in my career. I don't want to create a lot of hype or pressure, and just kind of surprise people. I think I like surprises, so like I like having that element of surprise. And it's definitely like the Appalachian Trail took a lot out of me. Like a lot of people would say, "Oh, well, why don't you do another one next year?" Like, what's next? Like they wanted something else to watch for a month and a half on their computer at work, which is super cool. Like people would come out on the trail and be like, "Oh, Scott, I watch you in the morning when I wake up at home. I go to work. I check in multiple times during the day, and then I'm checking at night, and you're still going." Like, so I can imagine it is kind of fun to do that. And helping my buddy Carl last year break my own record was a lot of fun.
You broke his record, right?
I didn't break his record. It was Jennifer Farr Davis's. And then he broke mine.
Okay, he broke yours.
But it was really cool to experiencing it from the other side. And going down and helping him for 10 days and watching the progress was super cool. Yeah.
Awesome. So next adventures. We're kind of wrapping up our walk here again. I'm really appreciative of you taking the time. But before we sign off, any kind of calls to action that you'd like to make to to our Charity Miles community out there who are hopefully walking and running along with us?
Yeah, well, if there's anybody, I know you're based in New York City, or is Jersey, I'm sorry.
No, I'm in New York City.
You're in New York City.
My heart's in New Jersey.
You mentioned Every Mother Counts. They still have a few slots. I know there's a lot of New York City slots out there, but I just got an email from Christy the other day saying, hey, if you know anybody or if you can get the word out, but they do have a few spots for New York City Marathon, so if there's anybody looking for that. I kind of feel like I'm a equal opportunist when it comes to like charitable groups, and I do a lot of nonprofit work, and I mix it up, and I work with a lot of different groups, and I think that's what's key to get people, just find something that you can get your heart and your body and your soul behind, and start after it. And if it just means, hey, I'm gonna start walking and running with this group, or I'm gonna run a marathon or run an event or walk something for another, or one of the best ways I try to tell people, my buddy Terrence Gershberg, I've done a little work with his Back on My Feet.
They're another one of our partners.
I'd encourage folks, if you're in a major city, I think they have 7 chapters now, just go out and run. A lot of people know we have a homeless population and a major issue in this country, and I would say get out and run with them. I mean, that's one of the best ways. You don't have to go out and donate a bunch of money, raise a bunch of money. I think getting out and finding when some of these groups do their training runs, and just do something that you love to do, whether it's walking or running, and do that while you're doing it, just to get started. I think so many people think they have to raise a bunch of money, or they have to do something really big to be impactful, or to just get started. It feels like they've got to commit to something big. Just get out and run or walk.
Yeah, just take that first step.
Exactly.
Scott, thank you again. Raven, thank you again. She's conked out there.
She's passed out big time.
In the sleeping bag, in the backpack she's got on. Really grateful for this opportunity to walk with you. I hope all of you out there are as inspired by Scott as I am, and I hope you've all enjoyed this walk in Boulder, Colorado with us, wherever you may be. Scott, thanks again.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, and thanks for walking with me.
Every mile matters. Take care.
Got to mention we were at altitude too.
Hi there, everybody. Gene again. Thanks so much for walking with me and Scott today. Hope that you were as inspired by him as I am. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast, share it with your friends, and leave a review. Really helps get the word out there. And be sure to tune in again next week, where we'll be walking in Topsfield, Massachusetts, with author, thought leader, and entrepreneur Dan Pallotta, who is not only a pioneer when it comes to walking, running, and biking for charity, but truly a game changer in the way that all charities are approaching or should be approaching their missions. It's a phenomenal interview. Really going to love it. And I look forward to walking with you again then. And until then, thanks again for joining us today. Every mile matters. Bye.